Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails are being released as part of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. It comes after a brief delay following scenes of chaos which unfolded in Gaza earlier as 7 hostages were handed over to the Red Cross. Now, in total, 8 hostages held by Hamas and Islamic Jihad are now out of the enclave. They include a female Israeli soldier, an 80-year-old Israeli man, and 5 Thai nationals. For more on this story, we can go across to correspondent Noga Tarnopolsky standing by in Jerusalem. Noga, what's the latest on the Palestinian prisoner release?
Well, we've gotten the list of names, not a total list, but among the names, there's one prisoner who was accused just in 2022 of plotting to kill Netanyahu's then Minister for National Defense. Our viewers may remember Itamar Ben-Gvir, himself a convicted terrorist who Netanyahu put in this all-important role to keep his government together. So I'm actually now heading towards East Jerusalem to see if there are any, despite Israeli army warnings against any celebrations for the release of terrorists or convicts, if there is going to be any kind of commemoration of this moment in East Jerusalem. We know that others of the prisoners, one was convicted of a terror attack that cost 45 lives. These are much heavier prisoners than what Israelis have been accustomed to seeing in this process of hostages for prisoner exchange until now. And the Israeli government is doing everything it can to try and minimize the effect of these prisoners being released.
Noga, earlier we saw 3 Israelis, including an Israeli soldier, and 5 Thai nationals who were released. Do we know anything about the condition of these former hostages?
Yeah, they all seem to be in what the medical authorities are calling stable condition right now. There were great fears for the condition of Gadi Moses. He's 80. He turned 80 in captivity. He's a farmer from the community, the kibbutz of Nir Oz, and there were great fears that he actually wasn't alive. So when his name was announced yesterday, that was already a surprise. And then tomorrow, in these scenes that we see now on screen, these kind of mob chaos scenes, he was caught by the cameras walking on his own 2 feet. We have just seen a picture of him with his children. He seems to be okay, and he was taken to the same hospital that the young soldiers were taken to, which means he's not considered in danger or in critical condition. He would otherwise have been taken to a completely different site that was prepared to receive him.
Noga, thank you very much for the update. Noga Tarnopolsky reporting there for us from Jerusalem. We can now bring in our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Rob, we have now the release of the Palestinian prisoners that has gotten underway after a delay due to, as Noga pointed out, those chaotic scenes we saw in the Gaza Strip earlier.
In Khan Yunis.
In Khan Yunis earlier, because we had throngs of people, are surrounding these hostages who were being released. Clearly, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, everyone's trying to shape the narrative here.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it's about. It's not clear why the scenes were so sort of rough today by comparison with what we witnessed on the 2 other hostage release occasions. It may be because Islamic Jihad was involved in it this time round. We simply don't know. But, you know, what is clear is that both sides are trying to claim the narrative here. Israel wants to show that it's the victor in this exchange, that everything is happening pretty much on its terms, but at the same time, Hamas in particular is trying to show that it's in control inside the Gaza Strip, that the prisoners that it has, the hostages that it has, are being released on its terms. And part of that is the stage that we're seeing, where the hostages are made to go up on stage. They're giving what appears to be something like a sort of certificate of having been hostages. Yeah. And behind them, there are banners, celebrating the victory over Zionism and that sort of thing, which is anathema to the Israeli government. There's nothing. That's the last thing they want to see being broadcast around televisions all around the world. But that is what's being showed all around the world. But by hitting back against Hamas today, by delaying the release of the Palestinian hostages, Israel is trying to demonstrate that it is in control. Both sides are playing games in a way here.
Now, I want to talk about, because you yourself were in Israel during, as the ceasefire deal went into effect.
Yeah.
Now we, of course, have hostages who are being released, hostages who are alive, being released, reunited with their loved ones, and scenes of joy, erupting on our TV screens. But what happens when Hamas starts to release the dead? Things will, of course, change in the country, won't it? The mood won't be as celebratory as it is right now.
Well, I wouldn't describe the mood as being particularly celebratory now. I mean, obviously, there's an element when you see the prisoners being released, but there's a lot of happiness about that. But people are very conscious of the fact that there are hostages who have died. Quite a large number, in fact. We don't know the precise number, but we're talking probably in the region of 30 or so. And there are hostages who are alive but are still in captivity. So the joy that people are experiencing today is tempered by that knowledge that people are still suffering and that people have still died. But you're right. When dead hostages are released, there will be a lot of grieving in Israel. And once all the hostages are released, fingers will start to be pointed at Benjamin Netanyahu, and there will be demands for responsibility. So far we've seen the army leaders in charge of what happened on the 7th of October admitting their share of the responsibility. But so far, Prime Minister Netanyahu has not admitted his own responsibility. But when we get past this stage, the demands for him to explain his role will be very hard for him to resist.
And potentially calls for him to go. But I just want to ask you briefly about the Palestinian prisoners who have been released. We heard there from Noga that the Israelis are trying to control any celebrations from breaking out in parts of East Jerusalem. How can they go about controlling that? And
well,
what does it say?
Well, when I was there, I was in Ramallah for the release of Palestinian hostages, and one thing that they did was to delay the release until it was way past midnight when it happened. And a lot of people had moved. Bear in mind, too, that a lot of the prisoners coming to Ramallah have to go on elsewhere as well. They don't all come from Ramallah, they come from elsewhere in the West Bank. I'm sure that applies to those who have been released today. But in addition to that, they've learned their lessons from the last two exchanges, and the buses now have their windows blacked out, so you can't see the prisoners inside giving victory signs and waving to the crowds as they come across them. And in addition, the police, by Palestinian accounts today, the Israeli police opened fire on crowds of people waiting at the Beitunia Ramallah roundabout, just leading into Ramallah, with rubber bullets and in some cases apparently live rounds, according to some accounts, and gas. 14 people injured. So that's a pretty tough response.
I believe, Rob, we can go back to our correspondent, Noga Tarnopolsky, standing by in Jerusalem. Noga, what happens now in terms of the next batch of hostage releases that is being planned for this weekend, I believe?
That's right. And, as much as this is an international signed agreement, it's still very chaotic. So, for example, just this afternoon, President Trump's Mideast envoy, Steve Witkoff, wandered through the tents of hostages' families in Tel Aviv, and he told them and journalists who accompanied him that tomorrow an American hostage would be released. If that happens, that's going to be outside of the terms of the agreement, just like the 8 hostages released today were separate from the terms of the agreement. Then we will continue on Saturday. The expectation is that 3 adult male hostages will be released, and Israel will release around 100 Palestinian prisoners in exchange. In addition, this weekend, talks are supposed to begin between the two sides for what's called phase 2 of this agreement, which means the remaining 65 Israeli hostages and a complete withdrawal of IDF troops from Gaza. Again, this is going to be a major political stumbling block for Prime Minister Netanyahu to have to find a way to resolve.
Because Noga, Netanyahu also has the pressure from far-right elements of his own cabinet, but he also has Steve Witkoff, who's arm twisting him, doesn't he?
Yeah, I don't know if arm twisting is the right term. Israelis, the huge majority of whom are willing for this war to end so that the hostages can come back, Israelis have been pressuring him for a long time. That doesn't seem to have had the effect that a week and a half of President Trump in office has had. And now Netanyahu has announced that he will be visiting the White House on Tuesday. So interestingly, on the one hand, Netanyahu presented this as a very victorious moment, that he'll be the first foreign leader to visit Trump in the White House. But the expectation from diplomats here is that Donald Trump is going to insist to Netanyahu that whatever his cabinet challenges are or his coalition challenges are, that this deal has to come through. And this appears to be a really impressive tactical success on the part of the families of Israeli hostages who started already many weeks ago to reach out to the Trump team and to try and make their issue the Trumpian issue.
Indeed, Rob, it seems that the Donald Trump effect is Donald Trump's presidency, as short as it is already having an effect on Netanyahu. Yes, he's going to be the first foreign leader to go to the White House, but Donald Trump wants to see this deal through. He wants a success, a feather in his hat.
But it will still hinge on what sort of deal is available. You know, we've heard Donald Trump also say, just as Benjamin Netanyahu has said, that Hamas cannot be part of the deal, that Hamas can't be left in place.
But he's
in
also
the
been
Gaza
floating
Strip.
the idea of getting rid of Gazans from the Gaza Strip. So where do you put these people?
Well, quite. You know, Donald Trump says a lot of things at different times. It's not absolutely clear what he's saying or what pressure he's putting on Benjamin Netanyahu. But the key issue here is going to be, first of all, the full release of all the hostages, which will in turn be dependent on the withdrawal of all Israeli troops. And if you accept what the Israelis are saying, no further role for Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Now, we've heard Donald Trump saying that he doesn't want a role for Hamas in the Gaza Strip at all. But how on earth do you persuade Hamas to accept that sort of a deal?
Also, if you don't have Hamas controlling the Gaza Strip, you need an emboldened or a strengthened Palestinian Authority, which sadly is not the case.
No, it's certainly not the case. You know, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli government, is doing nothing to encourage the idea of the Palestinian Authority playing any sort of role in post-conflict Gaza. On the contrary, you know, you hear members of the Israeli cabinet, we've spoken of the extreme right, who are talking about recolonization of the Gaza Strip and some sort of military control in the interim period. They're not on board with the discussions about a possible two-state solution to the situation or to any sort of civilian control in the Gaza Strip. At the moment, they're talking about Israeli military control.